Okay, if I have your attention, we're a little bit behind schedule, but anyway, we've got Mariolis is going to now talk to us about the do's and don'ts of supporting someone with mental illness. So,
thank you.
Yeah.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me well? Yeah? Okay, well, I'm very happy to be able to finally be here and share a little bit about my experience and mental health. So I'm going to be presenting two talks today for the remainder of the summit. The first topic will be the do's and don'ts on how to support someone with mental illness, and then the last topic will be how to identify burnout, how to prevent it, and how to go about it. And this is really inspired by my own story, because given to the breaking of my own health is how I got involved into in doing this for a full-time job now, which is really supporting and bringing hope to others that there is actually hope for full recovery when we deal with mental illness. Almost all of the mental illness have that hope, and we are all part of that. So as we begin, well, I think I introduced yesterday, and you already know who I am, but I actually have started working with Beautiful Minds. Just to give you a little bit of the background of who I am originally from Guatemala. My name is Mariola, and I worked with Beautiful Minds since 2017. I continue to work with them in supplementing the treatment approach for mental illness in a holistic way through life and health coaching. So actually, Dr. Vainas is the one that really meets people where they are in their deepest need, and he works with counselors like Amanda and Katie and the rest of our team at Beautiful Minds to really bring about hope and getting people from surviving to thriving, yeah, or at least from surviving to reviving, yeah, to really start seeing that there is a possibility for healing. And he does this in a holistic approach, like you've all learned. And then I come at the very end, kind of similar to the lineup of this summit, right? He started the content, Amanda supplemented, and then I come in at the very end part of the journey of people as they start walking independently and finding a renewed purpose after healing, right? Once we recover our health, we wonder, like, what am I going to do with my life now? How can I use my story to serve others? And this is where it becomes very interesting to discover our God-given purpose. And I really work with people, empowering them to get motivated to work on the change so that they can live up to their purpose. So this is what coaching is all about. It's really helping people discovering through the journey what they are about, right? What are their strengths? What are their limitations? What inspires them? What values support us and bring the reason why behind all the effort? And ultimately, creating strategies to live up to that and fully develop it in a holistic approach. So that's pretty much what I do as a coach, and how I support what the rest of the team at Beautiful Minds does. For those that don't really know what coaching is, it's kind of a new concept. So anyways, let's dive into the topic today. And why is this topic important? Well, definitely mental health problems are more common than heart, lung, and cancer combined. We don't talk about mental because it's hard to measure, right? It's very subjective. It's all related with the way we feel and the way we perceive life, but it's actually much more recurrent and much more disabling than physical ailments out there. Mental health issues also affect all society in some way, shape, or form. Dr. Vainas alluded to this yesterday. He said that as long as we live in a world of sin, we will all be exposed to trauma, right? Today's society, the way it's been built and the way we're living today, and Amanda and Dr. Vainas really talked about that today in the form of social media, right? Like, we're competing with this digital world that is pulling us, our minds especially, away from how we are originally designed to do. So the way today's society is built increases our vulnerability and likelihood to suffer mentally. So no one is exempt. So I'm glad we're all here because we all play a part. The other piece is many avoid seeking help due to what? Due to stigma. A lot of people are skeptical that treatment is available and that hope is available. And you know what others say? It's very influential, right? We shy away from being seen negatively or dysfunctional, right? So a lot of people don't seek help because of the lack of understanding that mental health is a lot more prevalent than what we think it is. And then the other thing, and this is just something that inspires hope, is that not every person in distress has a mental disorder. Many times we feel like there's no hope when we struggle mentally, but actually distress is something we all deal with, right? And that does not necessarily mean that there's no hope for us, but it's actually something that we need to learn how to live with, because it's so natural to our humanity. Yeah? So these are some of the reasons why I am honored to be here and share a little bit about not only my experience, but how we can be working together as the body of Christ in the society we live in, and through that work we can be of inspiration and light. There's actually two types of people in this world. One that suffers with mental illness, and the other one would be the person that knows someone that suffers from mental illness. So again, we're not exempt. We're all here either because we identify with some type of mental distress, or because we know someone closely in our lives, or more than one person, that may need support. Research tells us that more than 1 in 5 adults in the United States struggle with mental illness at least once in their life. I would dare to say that this number is a lot higher, because this is just people that have been diagnosed. Unfortunately, and especially in my case, I can attest to this. I lived with mental illness for many years of my life without even knowing I had depression, and then it developed into anxiety. So a lot of the people that are not included in this, they're still struggling, but they simply just don't know that they are. So it's a lot more common than what we think. Let's just begin with the big picture. What is mental health? Some people define it as a positive psychological well-being, so when emotionally we're balanced. Others define it as the absence of mental health problems. The World Health Organization defines it as a state of well-being in which an individual realizes his or her own abilities. An individual can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and is able to make a contribution to his or her community. I highlighted 3 words here. In a nutshell, mental health is, yes, a state of balance and well-being. 2, the capacity for us to cope with whatever life throws at us. And 3, being empowered to contribute in whatever community we're part of. That's what mental wellness or mental health means. I'd like to take a deeper look at what mental health is, because it's actually a continuum ranging from having good mental health to a mental disorder. There's different parts of mental health that we need to identify, right? Those that have been diagnosed with a condition that affects the ability of the person to think, to feel, and to behave, and also affecting their capacity to engage in daily activities or in normal relationships. But then there's the other people within mental health, which is those that do have a good control of their emotions. They have good cognitive functioning, and positive interactions is the opposite. There's a person in between here, or a definition in between these two, which is a broader term, which is mental health problem, that includes both mental health disorders and symptoms that may not be severe enough to be considered a diagnosis. So there's different elements within this continuum that we need to consider, both good, bad health, and everything in between. Other terms used for mental health problems are things like serious emotional disorder, emotional distress, mental illness, nervous exhaustion, mental breakdown, and burnout, which is what we're going to talk in the next hour. Now I want to also highlight that when we look at mental disorders, are amongst the most disabling illnesses. It's often leading to premature death. It is actually, mental disabilities is at the top of the list. Because disability caused by mental disorders may not be visible to others that suffer, it can be negatively judged as being weak, lazy, uncooperative, or not really ill. Can you identify with this? Sometimes we're like, oh, you know, that person is just really lazy, or that person is very slow. and we associate it with a personality characteristic or a character trait rather than their state. This lack of understanding contributes to the stigma, which is the biggest barrier to recovery. Just to give you a little bit of a contrast, mental disability compared to physical illnesses, this is how it feels. I'm talking about moderate depression, it's not even severe. Moderate depression, if we were to compare it to other physical disabilities, it would look a lot like relapsing multiple sclerosis, severe asthma, or chronic hepatitis B. Let's talk about severe depression. It's compared to quadriplegia. I mean, it's huge. So when we talk about depression, we really talk about one of the most disabling conditions. And depression, I say depression because it's the most common within the context of mental illness. But it is very disabling, and the fact that we don't understand it contributes to the stigma and the barrier of people getting help. So I'm really happy. I want to affirm you all for being here, because just by being here, when you leave today's room, after this conference, you're all going to be advocates of change by understanding a little bit more of what mental illness is and how we can create change and spaces for people to reach, hopefully, some type of help. Again, when we talk about mental illness, there's two sides, right? The person that struggles and the person that knows someone that struggles, but both share these characteristics. It feels lonely. Many times we feel lost or guilty or shameful, like I shouldn't be feeling like this, right? I feel overwhelmed because there's all these emotions that I cannot control. I also feel hopeless, like is there hope for me? I've heard that mental illness is just something I will need medication for because this is how our society deals with it. It's interesting when you hear Dr. Vainas' story, how he was very resistant to continue his career in psychiatry because he said, what they're teaching me in school is treating it with medication. And I'm all about lifestyle. He's a doctor that believes in God's remedies, right? So he felt challenged by that, yet he continued the process of finishing his career to use the title to bring about a different approach of how to deal with mental illness. So all in the spirit of bringing hope and a contrast to what the world is offering, which is a pill for every ill, right? But yeah, we need to be, as we become advocates of our health message as a church, we're part of bringing that hope, especially in the field of mental illness. Also, we feel exhausted, not only the person that feels mentally disabled, but also the people around us, because we show up with all these different irregularities, right? We also feel uncertain, amongst other emotions. What are the reasons why we feel like that? When we look at us being the person supporting someone else. Well, first, it is very heavy to constantly feeling the need to manage the needs of others, right? And the needs are very inconsistent. Sometimes we're happy, sometimes we're not. And also the person that demands our help. There's a lack of personal time, financial strain given to treatment costs or financial restrictions to get some treatment support. We also struggle to balance priorities, right? Because when we talk about mental illness, there's a lot of moments where we're not prepared for unexpected events, right? Or emotions that rise up that we don't really know how to do and balance. We worry about the person and the person's future just because we don't really know what the implications may be or how this can escalate. We also deal with stigma or judgment. Sometimes we feel fearful, like how can I share this with my friends and my support group because I feel embarrassed or guilty, or maybe I'm part of this, so I feel shameful. And that limits me to get the support group that we've learned all this weekend, how important that is, right, when we deal with mental illness. But the most important reason why we feel stressed when we're surrounded with someone that struggles mentally is because we don't really know what to do. We really don't know what to do. We don't learn this at school. We don't learn this in our society. Like, stigma is a big part of ignorance, right? The fact that we don't know how this looks like and how to navigate it. This is why I want to talk about today about the recovery paradigm, right? So the fact that we're all here is the first step to really getting involved in helping others that struggle with mental illness, because we're becoming familiarized with it instead of intimidated. I'd like to talk about the recovery paradigm because we're presenting this in contrast to what the world would do, which is send them to the doctor, get medication, and fix the problem with a Band-Aid. But are we really addressing the root with that approach? No, we're not. But research and experience has proven that mentally ill people can actually lead full lives. I remember when I was struggling with depression and anxiety for many years, I was highly functional. No matter how long or severe, recovery is possible. So it's never too late to reach out and support or even seek help. Recovery is also a deeply personal process of regaining balance in the midst of stress. So it is a process, and it has to be a personal process. And also recovery has a lot to do with learning how to cope with it, both internally, me suffering, or my loved one suffering, and also my environment, lifestyle. And we're really blessed to have the health message because that's a big component to help with mental recovery. What are some of the key components about this recovery paradigm? The first one is there's hope. And how can we speak hope to the people we love? Second one, it's a non-linear progress, especially with mental illness. We have ups and downs and setbacks and sideways, and we go forward, but then we go backward. So remembering this is important for us to really remain patient in the process. The third one is, it is a strength-based approach. We need to see human beings as individuals with their own challenges, but also with their own set of strengths. We all have the potential to be resilient. We've been built for that. So when we look at human beings from a place of potential, creativity and possibilities and opportunities open up. The fourth one is peer support. I would say this is one of the most important ones. Having a group where we can go and connect with others that understand our walk in this journey. Also having church members, right? Church communities where we can speak. I really want to affirm the pastor of this church that invited us here because he's advocating to talk about these specific challenges in our community because we are, as long as we're humans, we're going to be challenged, right? Especially with our mental health because that's where the battlefield is taking place. The enemy wants to take over our minds and not only distract it through like social media and all the digital competition we have that we talked this morning, but also by shutting off our minds and getting us hopeless and dismotivated. That's the best place to win the battle, right? So we must address the brain as the centerpiece of any health initiative we do. And how do we start? With ourselves. The fifth one is the self-direction. So I want to emphasize that recovery has to be a self and a personal process. The person needs to see and desire the change for it to take place. We may want the person to get better, but if they're not there yet, what we can do is move them so that they can see the value of it, but we can't do much other than expect or wait or promote or steer the person to the place of them saying, yes, I need the support. I can see the value of this. 6 is taking responsibility. And again, we won't be successful unless we have some skin in the game, right? So what we want when it comes to recovery is the person to feel that they have the responsibility rather than us taking the responsibility away from them, right? Because otherwise, how are we going to own it if we don't really have the responsibility? The seventh piece of the core components is it must be a holistic approach. Again, we must look at the person's physical, mental, emotional, and physical state. And that's the best and most effective recovery platform when it comes to mental health. Because what we eat affects how we think affects how we connect, and how we believe, and what we believe in, right? We've talked about that with Amanda yesterday on our thoughts can really make a different world and lead to more positive emotions and more positive behavior. 8 is person-centered. The person needs to be focusing on, or we must put it back to the person, right? It must be empowering them to do the work. Because for us to recover, we need to build those muscles. So again, yes, we may have a big, good support system and a good environment, but if it's not centered to what they need in terms of their culture, in terms of their preferences, in terms of their capacity, everything else won't be as effective if it's not applying to what that person needs specifically. So we must meet them where they are. Number 9 is empowering them. There's nothing like empowering someone to lead the change in their lives. I see that constantly through coaching. I mean, coaches, we're not supposed to say how to figure things out. That's not our role. That's more the role of a therapist. But we provide the opportunities to get them excited, right? To get the person excited and empowered for them to drive the car. And we're just the co-pilot saying, hey, have you seen this? Have you seen that? What about taking this turn? Or how about taking a stop here? But when you drive the car, you own it. And then the reward is bigger because you worked for it. And then the 10th component is respect. We must meet them again where they are, and we must respect their preferences. You know, the stages of change, the first stage of change is pre-contemplation, is where the person is not ready or is not convinced that they need to change. How do you move them from the place of not seeing the value to then saying, oh, you know what, I need that change, and then I'm gonna get prepared and start getting into action. That pre-contemplation stage, a lot of times can be shifted into contemplation, which is when the person says, okay, I need the help, through inspiration. We can bring examples of hope, testimonies of people that have recovered exactly like them and that have found value in their distress and in their journey, right? We can also, like Dr. Baina said yesterday, pain many times moves us towards change. It needs to hurt us enough for us to be willing to say, okay, I'm ready, I give up, let's try it, right? So inspiration, pain, but also education. A lot of the things that we don't do is because we don't know that it's available. So bringing about tools and resources to people and the platforms for them to step into and try it out can also be of great help to getting them towards starting to see the need and also applying it. Okay, there's 2 main components that are key as we look into the do's and don'ts, as we look into the steps of how to move and support people from a state of helplessness to a state of hopelessness. And those are trust and relationships. That's key. We cannot tell someone or suggest something to someone that doesn't trust us. So think of that person that we want to support. Think about, have I established enough contact? Do I have a strong enough relationship with that person for me to step into that space and make a suggestion or reach out? If not, let's start with that. What about building trust? What builds trust? Time and experiences. If I spend enough time with the person and I give them enough experiences for them to know that I'm trustworthy, that person's gonna trust me. So keep showing up. If the person's still resistant, I've had clients that have told me, Mariola, you don't imagine how much it helped when you sent me messages week after week, and I would not get any responses. Especially from this client that I can think of. His name is Patrick. And he would be like, you know, for months I would pray for him, I would send messages, and he never responded. I could have either given up or continued, but by faith I continued. And the day came when he said, you don't understand how much that meant for me. Every message you sent kept me above the water. I mean, just something in complete faith without expecting anything in return can really help us water the plant for that plant to eventually bloom. So build the relationships, and trust is going to be a key platform for us to approach this strategy towards change. So the first one is, let's seek to understand. And the first part is being here, yeah? Let's first understand what the problem looks like so that then I can define a strategy. And that strategy also has to be developed with the person. So I need to reach out and understand what works, how available and willing he is, what's available for us in terms of resources, and work with the person so that he can seek the help and we can support the process as he gets started. We can be with them all along, or we can just get them connected to whoever is going to take the next step towards their journey. Yeah? So let's break this in 3 pieces in more specifics. The first one is seeking to understand, getting acquainted. There's a mental health first aid course that I would highly encourage. I don't think it's more than $50. You can do it online. That helped me a lot as I started at Beautiful Minds, just to understand the most common mental health conditions, how these look like, how to address them, and what resources were available. Also coming to conferences like these, or internet. There's a lot of information out there online that we can tap into, like the Brain Podcast, the Brain People Podcast, for example. There's a lot of different literature that can help us. Mayo Clinic, I mean, they have a lot of resources here that can help us get trained on becoming familiarized with mental illness. The second one is observation. We can learn a lot just by observing. Be mindful of the person's symptoms. So when we have learned a little bit more of what mental illness is, then we need to compare it in the context of the person we want to support. And this is the symptoms, right? How does it look like? How does the person behave physically and mentally in terms of their behavior? How are the people showing up in terms of the social context? And how are they talking? A lot of what we can see in terms of hopelessness comes from just listening to someone. What language are they using? What words, right? And then we assess the risk. There will be cases where we won't even have time to do the homework. We just need to immediately step in and take action. And this is where we rely on other resources. So let's look at common signs of mental illness. So this is just in general. This is not going into depression or anxiety, but just in general. How does mental illness looks like, or how can we assess there may be a risk? The first one is extreme emotional changes, when the person moves from one end to the other extremely and constantly. The second one is excessive anger, hostility, or violence. Dramatic sleep and appetite changes. We see these people not sleeping enough or sleeping way too much. Those are ways of escaping, especially when you sleep too much. It might be your escape of reality. But when you don't sleep, it might be that we cannot turn our minds off. So these patterns can really show where the person is, because sleep is a very foundational component of our mental health. And also appetite. This is a way of coping. Many times we look for substance abuse, but what about food? Food is out there, it's accessible, it's approved, and many times we cope with it. So seeing the appetite changes and what we tend to go with in terms of food can also give us some guidelines. Number 4 is loss of interest in activities previously enjoyed. I think, Amanda, do you remember the term she said, the technical term? She said, adehonia or adheonia or something? Anhedonia, yeah. So that's when we used to enjoy things, but not anymore. Number 5, reduced ability to concentrate, yeah. So short lapse of memory, or simply not getting, like this fog that Amanda was talking about early yesterday. Number 6 is the inability to cope with daily challenges. Little things may be very heavy, like getting out of bed. I have clients that I work with when their goal of the day is, how do we get you to shower? Or how do we get you out of bed? And many times we see it like, oh my goodness, that's so easy. But mental illness can feel, like Amanda was saying, wearing something very heavy to the point that we cannot even get out of bed. So observing that will be very important in terms of daily challenges. Number 7 is thoughts or expressions related to harm. This is where we start to see the level of risk. If that person is harming themselves or being hostile and wanting to harm others. Increased unhealthy coping habits. This is where we go to see extremes, right? Like people tending to go to substance abuse or hiding behind the screen for many hours. Fear of or suspiciousness of others, when that person just starts isolating. That's a result of being suspicious or having fear. And then overall having difficulty sustaining relationships. So these are common signs of mental health. If we were to look at depression and anxiety, and again, I can give you a copy of my slides if you want the details. These are common symptoms. Usually these overlap. Amanda talked a little bit about that. But we can look at this from the standpoint of emotions. Like, how does depression look like, right? When the person is sad or guilty or helpless, that's emotionally. What about thoughts? How do we identify depression in the level of thoughts? When the person is blaming themselves, when they're pessimistic, when they're worrying all the time, when they have thoughts of suicide or death, like I wish I wouldn't be here, my family would be better off without me, right? These type of things, especially suicidal people, really speak up. they really show signs. It's very clear, and you can straight up ask them, do you want, you want to take your life? Do you have a plan? And they will share that with you because they really need the support. That's a way of really asking for help in a way of self-defeated behavior. So thoughts could be shown in that way. What about behavior? Crying spells. Sometimes we just start crying with not much of a trigger, right? You see that constantly when someone cries a lot, or withdrawal, or slowing down, right? Or the substance like the self-harm. And we also see it through physical, like chronic fatigue, lack of energy, headaches, weight loss or gain. So you can see depression in these different ways. Yeah? And anxiety would be a little bit different from depression, because depression, the way I like to define this in simple terms, is depression is when we're living in the past, anxiety is when we're living in the future. But they usually come together. You develop depression, anxiety comes right after, or anxiety and then depression comes. But usually they work like twins. It doesn't mean that everybody has both, but usually in the long term, if we don't treat it earlier in their stages, they can develop together. So it is important to also know that anxiety is a lot more like physically, you see people more anxious, more having pounding hearts, or having some chest pain, or hyperventilation, sweating, or feeling numb. Also, stomach is highly manifested in gastroenterology conditions, right? Dr. Nedley says that, I don't know if you know him, but he's very big in our church for mental health and depression and anxiety. In his program, he says that the biggest side effect of depression and anxiety is gastroenterology problems, gastrointestinal problems, and also fibromyalgia, which is the inflammation of the whole body. So the body really manifests physically a lot of our mental. Also, anxiety can be manifested through muscle aches, restlessness, tremors, inability to relax. These are just some examples of the two main and most common mental conditions that helps us and gives us an example of what this looks like, so that we're out in the lookout for the common symptoms. We also have some screening tools online, like the PHQ-9. Someone asked that in the Q&A. If you want to take a picture of these are the two ones that we use at Beautiful Minds. We have more in our website, but you can take a picture of this and it will take us to our website where you can test mental health, and you can see other things like substance abuse screening tools, and a little bit more in depth of the anxiety. So just to know that there are tools to screen the people that we're concerned about and to get an idea. This is not to diagnose, but to see in what levels they're struggling, and if what we're assuming or suspecting may be actually true, that they are struggling mentally. Also, part of the first step is assessing the risk for suicide and harm. So asking ourselves questions like, is this person harming himself or herself? Amanda gave some examples yesterday. Self-harm not necessarily has to do with cutting ourselves, but also could be by isolating or injuring ourselves or overeating, right? Is the person experiencing extreme distress? So panic attacks or quick reactions or big reactions to traumatic events. That also helps us to know if they're at risk. And then if the person's behavior is disturbing to others, are they being aggressive or lose touch with reality? Why is this important to assess? Because they may engage in very harmful or even risky situations that puts their life or health at risk. If the persons appear to be at risk of harming themselves or others, seek help immediately. And what do we have for that? What comes to mind? 3 numbers, 911. That's what we need to do. If we see something that doesn't allow time, we'll just call 911 and get immediate help, and then we figure out a strategy. This is very important to really take action in the moment. Also, number 2, so we talked about assessing, right? Understanding the situation. And now that we assessed it, now let's create a strategy to reach out. So the first one is, let's establish connection. And maybe we're already connecting with this person, but what I mean with this is really creating a space of safety, a space where they feel secure, confidential, right? We cannot talk about mental health just so openly so that the person feels ashamed, but we need to create a space for them to want to open up. We want to practice empathy, really try to see the world through their eyes. And how do you do that? By asking questions, by assuring, am I understanding you correctly? Is this what I'm understanding from what you're feeling and saying and doing? Also, listening in a way that we can also go deeper. Instead of listening just to understand, listening to what the pain point is, what's triggering them, right? Let's affirm them and say, hey, thank you for sharing. This is important. I feel honored that you open up with me. I want to affirm you for sharing this, right? Because many times just sharing is a big step, opening up and assuring them, you know? Not saying, oh, everything's going to be okay, you're going to be fine, but saying, hey, we're going to find help, you're not alone, I'm right here with you. Yeah? Prayer can be also a way of assuring the person. God's promises can be very, very uplifting when we feel that we're drowning, especially for those that believe in God. It's when we're struggling with mental illness, it's hard to feel that God is around us. It's so hard to feel that. You can see it with David, right? He felt like, where is God in my distress? God was right there with him. He knew, but he couldn't feel him. So by us reminding people of them not being alone can be of big support. And then encourage professional help. What's our role? Well, you may be the only person or the first line of support to this person and the only link for them to get help. Be mindful of listening with your whole body. Your body language tells a lot more, right? Like, let's create that openness, that space for them to feel comforted. Let's be fully present and help them be reminded and feel that we understand them. Not like, oh, I know what mental health feels like because sharing my experiences in the way. No, it's not about us, it's about them. But helping them feel that we understand them, that they need support, that we're here for them, can really make them continue to open up and work with you. Ask questions and validate. A lot of the times when we're struggling mentally, we have a lot of distortions. So this is where we come in with the ABC model that Amanda taught us, right? Like, is it true? Is it helpful? How can we bring truth and gratitude within the context so that the person can start to see hope rather than maximizing what's happening, right? Like bringing them back to their reality through our conversation in a loving way can help us. Also, sharing instead of I, because this is not about us, especially when we're trying to establish a connection. Let's talk to them about you. You, right? Like, you're feeling like this. What you're doing here is looking like that, but not me. It's going back to them. Let's create a safe space. We talked about that. The key point here is not judging them. Even though we know they may be in a negative or sinful behavior that is harming them, let's try to understand that behind every behavior, there's an explanation, right? And many times we hurt ourselves because we're hurting so much. And I really like this concept that I learned recently that says, hurt people hurt others. And I had a hard time when I started being a coach at Beautiful Minds because we deal with a lot of hurt people that they want the help, but they don't want to work with you sometimes because they don't believe in hope. They don't believe it is possible. So you're going to be attacked. You're going to be having a lot of pushback many times. But if you remember that it's because they're hurting, it's going to help you be more empathetic and really walk around them. Not taking things personally and not judging them is key in the process. So offering that reassurance and speaking hope. I think out of everything, what we can do with no training is just how do we speak hope? And how do we let the Holy Spirit work in us so that we can be God's hands and feet and words to the people around us. God can really use us not knowing much. But if we're connected to Him, He'll show us and He'll give us the wisdom on how to reach and serve others. Do's and don'ts then, just key components here in terms of the do's. Listen with an open mind. So judgment should be taken away. Or things like saying comments like, oh, just pray about it. Or, oh, come on, cheer up, it will be a better day tomorrow. I mean, we're trying to help, but we're not really helping. Let's ask to understand. That's what we seek. When we want to understand, we go deeper in our questions. Don't say you know what they feel if you don't. Encourage seeking help. Avoid being the diagnoser. Avoid saying, oh, I learned, Mariola taught us and Amanda taught us what depression looks like, so you probably have depression. No, we're not going there. The reason why we're understanding is to identify the level of risk and to see how we can speak to them. Help out with daily tasks. When you're depressed or anxious or struggling, you need help. And many times the help can be just picking up things that they need to address, like helping with the kids or helping with the house duties, right? That's a great way of helping. Focus on what we can control and accepting that the person is in their journey and that even though we would like them to do certain things or go at a certain speed, we must focus on what I can control to continue serving them. And then prayer, not neglecting prayer, as Amanda was saying, is very important. Back to the don'ts, avoid diagnosing. Don't question their decisions, even though it may be a bad decision. What's the worst thing that can happen when we make a bad decision? Or the best thing?
Learn something.
We learn something, absolutely. And we are all in a journey, right? And the best learning comes from us experiencing it. So don't question their decisions, allow them to explore themselves and the process along the way. Don't take things personally, avoid pressuring them, yeah? No pressure, and this can take long, but it's better to go slowly and surely than to try to go fast and then defeat the purpose of wanting to help. And then let's not miss this opportunity to serve. Many times we feel intimidated, like, oh, you know, someone that in my family struggles with mental illness and I don't know what to do. You know what? We can turn that around and reframe it as an opportunity for us to serve them and to practice what Jesus asked us all to do, the Great Commission. And He has given us this mission. Why? Why has Jesus called us to be like Him and serve others? Does He need us?
Glorify Him.
To glorify Him, He doesn't really need us. He does it for our value, for our benefit, to bless us. So why are we missing out on these opportunities by fearing that we cannot really do them, right? Love will displace that fear by us wanting to serve, and we have the best role model. I mean, Dr. Vainas, Amanda, and me, we can stand up here and say, this is how you address this. But the best teacher has already given us the example. So studying him, his role model, will also help us. Helpful resources, just to keep in mind, there's a lot of good websites, Mental Health America, the National Council for Behavioral Health. All these listed here are really good. I also want to encourage to check out Beautiful Minds, the Overcoming program that we have. I know we ran out of flyers in the back, but you can take a picture of the screen and you can download the page so that you can register and sign up for more information. We're actually going to start our first program this week. I think tomorrow or Tuesday is the start date. And this program has been built to really provide good content from a psychiatry standpoint and counseling, but we also have the lifestyle. It's an 8-week program where people go through the program. I think Dr. Vainas talked about it, and they're supported by a coach in terms of how to use the content and apply it in their daily lives, right? Creating goals, strategies in an individualized concept, but we also have a group called Every Week. So this program not only offers content and the support of a coach, but also the community of people sharing and learning alongside other like-minded people. And then the third one, as we wrap it up, support the process. So what we want is to remain patient. We would like quick results. We live in a world where microwaves have really shifted us from instant gratification, right? We want things to be quick. This is why the pills are so successful. This is why these doctors have long waiting lists, because they just treat the problem with a band-aid. But no, what we're trying to look here is a root-founded approach. So also, how can we be accountable in the process? That's one of the biggest reasons why coaches exist, which is touching base with someone. How can I be accountable? Like making sure week by week, how am I doing? Am I making progress? What's working? What's not? What needs to be refined? What did I learn? And really take that time for self-reflection with someone can really help them identify the best strategy forward. Celebrate progress, even if the progress is just having had that initial contact with you. That first conversation must be celebrated, because every step forward will bring about big results, especially when we talk about mental health, because every piece connects to the big picture. Encourage whole health, so yeah, definitely seeking support, counseling, psychiatry, but how can we also create a space to embrace the health message, right? And this, we must do it not only promoting it, but ourselves living it, yeah? This is the best sermon preached, right? How we live our lives. And actually we have, instead of the New Start acronym, we have created our own version at Beautiful Minds, which is the 10 health laws, 10 mental health laws. And we've created this acronym focused on how to promote the optimal brain health. And we have done it choosing two important words coming and inspired by scripture, which is choose life. Because life is about making decisions. Every decision we make either builds or subtracts from our strategy, from our success. So we must empower people to use this beautiful power that we've all inherited, which is the power of choice, in creating that environment and holistically approach whatever it needs to be approached in terms of their needs. So what does it stand for? C for connection. What was the secret for ultimate happiness? C. Connection, that's what Dr. Vines taught, absolutely. Hydration. This is, how does it look like in terms of mental health? Well, our brains are made up of almost 90% of water. It's amazing. So keeping it hydrated will help us, but also hydration can be associated with the water therapies, like he was saying, right? When someone is highly depressed, hydrotherapies are very helpful to get the blood circulation and so forth. So we know a lot about this in our church. Optimism, practicing gratitude, we did a little bit yesterday on that, and how every day practicing gratitude, this is a key component of our outpatient program. Amanda starts the day asking every member in that group, what are you grateful for? And it's amazing, but people are like, I'm not grateful for anything. When we're depressed, we don't find anything to be grateful. It's so hard. But little by little, just by saying, you know what, I'm grateful that I'm wearing shoes and that I have a chair to sit on. We start with such little things, but little by little, after the 10 days, it's amazing how you see these people increasing all the reasons. The list of gratitude starts growing to the point that it sets the stage for the day of the treatment. You know, that 3-hour time we have with the patients can really shift when we started with gratitude. They just shift, they come negative, but by thinking what are they thankful for, they're more open. Amazing. So practicing this optimism can be very helpful. Oxygen, that's also good, not only because we need it, right? But also when it comes to mental health, it helps us with grounding, deep breathing, right? Taking breaks and being in contact with good air, that means outdoors. Self-control, we already know, that's the temperance. Exercise not only physical, which by the way, I have a great book that I would like to recommend you, written by a psychiatrist. Rady, I think it's his last name. The book is called Spark. And this doctor, that's what got me initiated to create the exercise habit in my life, because I would struggle a lot to do the exercise regularly. And just by reading that book, changed my life. So this doctor writes about what kind of exercise is helpful depending on the mental health condition. He talks also about anti-aging hormones, like general things, but it's all related to exercise and the benefits of the mental. I don't remember the first name, but his last name is Ratey, R-A-T-E-Y, and it's called Spark. Fantastic book. So exercising, definitely one of the most important things. I remember in the program from Dr. Vines, the inpatient, Dr. Netley, he would prescribe the more anxiety, the more exercise. It was amazing how he related with getting out and breaking the sweat. Yeah, so definitely exercise is very important, but I also want to take it to the deeper level, which is exercising the reframing. Yeah, it's very important to exercise the true and the helpful component that Amanda shared. It's one of the most effective treatment therapies, just the CBT. So getting well versed in this and also sharing it with others can be effective. And then light is a big component for mental health, not only because the sunlight, and we know that regulates our circadian rhythms, but also light in terms of the screens. Amanda said, cut the internet. It's so important, especially because this is one of the biggest precursors of mental illness. So taking a look at how we practice that in our life and in our environment is very important. Internal clock, good sleep. Our Sabbath comes into that, right? Our circa septum rhythm, which is our 7th day of rest, and how are we using that day? But also taking breaks between our meals, right? That's regulating the different clocks, because when we eat at the same time and we have routines, that structure is very helpful when we're struggling with mental conditions. Food not only what we eat, right? Good mood, good food, but also what are we feeding ourselves with? What are we looking at? What are we listening to? What are we eating One of the key components that Dr. Binas prescribes when people are very anxious is classical music. So that would be considered as good food, right, for the spirit. And then environment. Why is environment important? Because we cannot create change unless what surrounds us is built for that. I've noticed that to be a very important component in coaching, because we may create great strategies, but if we don't have an environment that supports that, we're not likely to achieve it. So choose life if you can memorize this one, and if not, I'm going to give you a handout for you to start practicing it or sharing it with someone else. I just want to share here what we talked about yesterday. So overall, our master, our teacher is Christ. He showed us not only how to serve, but he also showed us how to endure and embrace challenges. He counts it a blessing in Matthew 5, the Beatitudes, right? He endured pain, hardship, suffering, and sorrows. But what kept him going? What he had in the end goal. He wanted to restore the connection with us. He had a motivation to do the work. And that kept him going to the point of finding joy in tribulation. He related with being the man of sorrows, and he was well acquainted with grief. But why? Why do you think he did that? So that we could connect with him. And there's a fantastic book that approaches mental health, which is The Hidden Half of the Gospel. I don't know if you've heard it, and if not, can you please check it out? This is actually a great way of doing CBT with a biblical approach, and you can get trained on this. And it also helps you to see that Christ went through all this pain because he wants to replace it in our own lives with his love, with him, because he paid for it already. So it's a fantastic book if you can take a hold of and read a little bit more. But I want to remind us all that we're called to run with endurance whatever race is set before us. It could be us with our own personal story, or it could be one of the people that we love the most, right? People that are around us. But looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and has sat down at the right hand of the throne. We're all headed towards that direction. But you know what? Many times, and I've learned this from my own personal experience, going through challenges is what really breaks us so that he can recreate us. This is where we lose to pride, right? Where we want to get rid of pride. And how do we do that? Being humbled by life's challenges. So God can use all this for the value of our character building. And he reminds us that if we feel broken, that if we feel lonely, we should count that as a blessing. Why? Because we have him. Because he's already done it for us. He's taught us how, and he has a reward for us in the process to look forward to. He promises that we will get to that place one day, and it's very soon, where he will wipe away our tears with his beautiful wounded hands, and he shall put an end to death, and to pain, and to crying. Why? Because he's already conquered the victory. So we have that hope to look forward. And in summary, I just want to say that what mental health needs is more sunlight, is more candor, and more unashamed conversation. What we really need to do is to connect and speak hope to others. Thank you.